There being no citizens here to render comment, we've satisfied that element of the agenda. Next item is approval of the February 3rd, 2015 minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, comprehensive plan update, vision statement continued. I welcome to the presentation table Kenmore's senior planner, Lori Anderson.
Really, this just gets more than...
It does. So last
You know,
night...
it's Oscars week.
Is that
Go the extra mile.
Maybe that's it. So last night, the results of the survey were presented to council. There was a PowerPoint presentation that summarized those results, and we'll get that PowerPoint presentation up on the website so people can actually see those. But we did provide a complete copy to all council members and the commission, which also includes individual comments, sort of supplements how people responded to those questions. So I think we can probably report on, or maybe probably better from some of the commissioners who were there, on what they heard the council say about the vision statement, or some input they had on some of the questions that the commission posed to them. But I think probably the meatiest part of the discussion on the vision statement will be at the next meeting, so that you've all had a chance to digest, review, and if we do get any questions or comments from the council in the next week or two, we can also provide those to you as well.
All right. Do we want any, Debbie, you invited comment from those who were there? Is that right?
I think, because I think, you know, they several commission members asked council a question about what do you think about certain things, so it probably makes more sense for those commissioners to ask. I know Angela had several sort of pointed questions, so and Mike, I think, had some questions. And Deborah had some comments too. So,
you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll share some of the questions that I asked. We had only received a copy of the survey last night, so we didn't have time to review all of the comments and then formulate a lot of questions. But just based off of my initial scan, I had noticed that several people commented on history. There was quite a bit of debate about what our history was, or whether we even have any history even. And so I was asking the council what they thought about keeping that in there, and they seemed to all agree that the fact that people questioned it was reason enough to emphasize it and make sure that we do due diligence in promoting it and raising awareness about it. I'd also asked about the term diversity. There were several comments about it. And then Councilmember Herbig actually had pulled out one that he thought might be a better term to use, which was inclusive rather than using the term diversity. Someone had commented that that's a kind of a dated term that's becoming less and less used, and that inclusive summarizes the feeling that we're getting, which is we want to make everyone feel welcome rather than pointing out differences. And then I had also asked about the term family friendly, you know, just based on some of the comments people said, well, I'm single, you know, I want the city to be family friendly, but what about a single people too? So I thought, you know, do we need to call that out specifically? There wasn't, there didn't seem to be strong opinions against using that term or keeping it. So, so I had asked about those, and then I had also posed this question about using this term that Council Member Sperry had mentioned to me recently. She said that we were talking about housing, and she said, well, she considers the city a city of choice, and I really like that. That seemed that resonated with me, and so I said, well, what if we use that maybe not necessarily in the vision statement, but maybe as like an underlying value when planning, to think about do we have a lot of choice as residents here in Kenmore? Choices in our schools, choices in our supermarkets, choices in all of the services here in the city. But they felt that that was too intangible, not maybe not focused enough to take action on, at least for the vision statement, which.
Great, thank you. Deborah, you want to add to that?
I thought I kind of had focused on, is it on this way?
High is on.
Up.
When it's elevated, you're on.
Up. Oh, that way.
I can hear
Okay. That there have been a lot of emphasis in the comments and the prioritization of the waterfront as an asset and wanting connection to the waterfront, which is actually, I think, reflected in one of the new statements that you guys must have generated, and that was something that had been consistent over many years as well. So it was nice to continue to see that.
All right. Anybody else? Mike?
Yeah, a couple other things. I think Angela tackled the hardest ones. These were more functional, maybe. So there was some conversation around length. This is pretty long, as it was observed yesterday. It tries to perhaps say everything. And so we had a discussion about whether or not that was the direction the Planning Commission was recommending, that it stay this length, or maybe some direction that it be shortened, and if so, how. And we said we'd get back to you on that. The other functional piece was, as Lori will show in the PowerPoint presentation, you're going to show that again, what we looked at last night?
I was not going to show it tonight, but
Oh.
I will send it out.
Yeah. So there were some pretty good slides towards the end of the PowerPoint, Doug, that Lori has put together that show which of the questions in the survey had the highest strongly agree responses, and which had the most agree and disagree responses. And so there was some conversation about, should that drive some prioritization, and should those elements move towards the top of the list? Or should they carry more weight in some way? Should they be emphasized? Councilman Curtis wondered if they should be in bold. And so I think the conversation about length and emphasizing priorities kind of goes hand in hand. Maybe not one or the other, but I think it's part of the same conversation.
Thank you. Anybody else? Carol?
When we, is it on now? Okay. Last night when we were having this discussion and we were looking at your summary slides, the council's response, at least from my take on it, was that they wanted us to look at the survey's results, but not necessarily make the vision statement bigger, but perhaps look at making it more concise. Is that something that you see as part of our role tonight?
I might speak to that. I was anticipating that tonight, given that two of the commissioners are just seeing it tonight, and you all were busy last night, so I'm sure you weren't home reading all the results. I thought tonight we would just sort of get everybody's impressions and recap and see if there were any specific questions that we need to follow up on, and that we do the bulk of our discussion, the meat of potential amendments, at your next meeting next week.
Okay.
So if everyone's comfortable with that, I think that's probably the most efficient approach.
All right. Yeah, Deborah.
One thought that I think we talked about it last night, was the idea possibly of grouping the statements kind of conceptually, and or with prioritization. So I didn't know whether, I took a crack at that. So I didn't know whether that was something for, again, it was a little unclear whether things were tonight or next week or what.
Sounds like we should hold over.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Take on the bigger project.
Again, if people want to discuss elements of it tonight, there's no reason we can't if people are ready. I'm just afraid that not everybody is ready. I certainly think that staff will have a few recommendations, having heard the conversation. So that's why I'm thinking we can maybe really complete the task next Tuesday, but there's no reason if you have something you want to discuss tonight that we can't.
Well, speaking as one who didn't attend last night, I think it's probably more efficient if we waited for your recommendations and took it on in one evening. I'm open to.
I'm probably in a minority. I did get through all of it by tonight, but so I think
I just want the record to show that Deborah did extra credit.
I'm willing to defer.
Deborah is leading the class at this point. Mark, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want one other comment that was made. I think it was Council Member Danuski. I thought was kind of interesting. She said it doesn't need to be ranked. Our list of the various visions, but people who read it may perceive that there is a ranking. So, whether we boldface or we ought to think at some point about how this is perceived and whether there is a need to do some kind of either grouping or ranking, and I don't have the answer, but that was, I thought, a pretty astute point on how it's perceived.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you know that too, Lori.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the pattern with a lot of the stuff we presented. We've presented things to the council that way,
right?
And that's how they like it. Yeah. So whether we put bold print, underlined stars, or different colors on it, I guess we could save for later. I think one can go overboard myself with that kind of thing. But all right. Yes, Carol.
So what we're going to try and do, just so I can be a team player, is to take the survey results and maybe not weight them in terms of strong, weak, but using that as our springboard, have a discussion to see how we're going to organize these statements to present them to the council so that they can.
Right. So let me just back up a little bit.
Okay.
So before the survey ever went out, the Planning Commission at the end of last year took the existing vision statement and spent a long time going through sort of phrase by phrase and amending it. And that's the version that was attached in your packet with the yellow underlined strike through. Right. And I do have, Deborah had asked that we have a clean copy. I have a clean copy and I'll hand it out tonight. I do think it's easier to read. You get the flow of the whole thing. Right. So I think that will be useful as you look to your discussion. So anyway, after then it was amended. The amended version went to the City Council on a couple of different occasions. One was a sort of a status update, and we let them know that the Planning Commission had been doing some amendments. It also was a topic at their retreat in January where they looked at it. And after those events occurred, then the survey went out. And the survey was really just a public input opportunity. So the things to remember about the survey: it's not a scientific survey. We don't know how much it reflects the community, but it's a gauge, just like we have a public meeting, and who knows how many people will come or if they're representative of the whole community. So it was a tool to be used to, uh-oh.
That's right. Almost no help. You didn't have any beer?
I didn't.
It was a Mexican.
To get some public feedback on it. So just like any other element of the comprehensive plan, and I know there was some confusion in the discussion, but the vision statement is sort of the introduction to the comprehensive plan. You'll be revisiting it now that you've heard some from the council and from the public, and seeing if you want to make any more tweaks, if you want to shift things around, you want to eliminate things, etc. Yeah, and Debbie went to get... Okay. And so you'll make a recommendation, and that then will go forward with the rest of the changes that you're recommending to the comprehensive plan. It'll go through a public hearing and then go forward to the council for their final action.
Okay. Okay.
Would you like me to pause for a minute? Would that be helpful?
Sure. We're going off the record. All right. Are we ready? Yeah. We're back on? All right. Planning Commission is back in session. So the next, I think that satisfies that element of the agenda, i.e. vision statement continued. And the next item is comprehensive plan update, public services element.
Right.
I turn again to our distinguished staff.
Do you want to say anything? Or just go for it?
Well, I think this is hopefully a relatively straightforward element, and so if it's possible to get through this element this evening, that would be, check that box, another element down. So that's the kind of goal for tonight.
Right. So this particular element, as you know, the public utilities element is where we talked about water and sewer and telecommunications and that kind of thing. This element talks about things like fire and police service, schools, the library. It actually talks about Kenmore city government. And the bulk of what is in front of you as your attachment 1 to the memo is background information. And just so that you know, all of this background information, with one exception, has been vetted by either the city or the fire department, the Chief Souther, who works for King County but is our police chief. The library has taken a look at the material. The only group that has not looked at the material is North Shore School District, and I sent it out a couple of weeks ago. I know they're very busy. I'm sure you all heard. Those of you who were here last night heard their presentation, and they're having this boundary change issue, which I'm sure is dominating their current activities. The information on the school district came from very recent publications on the North Shore School District site. So I am very confident that the information is accurate, and I assume that they will be in touch back to me, and if there are any changes that need to be made, we can do that. So again, most of this is background information. The human services information came from a wide variety of sources, and if the material again was not available on a website, then I called the agency to get the information. One thing I wanted for sure to include here were agencies that the city is providing funding to. So all of those are incorporated, and then general information, some of which is just updated from the previous information. So are there any questions about the background information? Again, that's the bulk of this particular element.
Anybody? Deborah?
I'm trying to find where it was. I have a note that it said it was at 9.5. I don't know whether that must be a page
probably
number.
page 9.5.
Yeah, so I think that was in the background.
Right, it is.
I'm trying to find it here, but I have a question to myself. We don't still share public works with Lake Forest Park? There must have been some question in my mind when I read that part that suggested that we don't, but I think we do, right?
We contract with Lake Forest Park for some of those functions.
Okay.
So the city, the management of the operation is here in the city, and then we contract. My understanding is we contract with workers at Lake Forest Park to do the things that, for example, Jennifer Gordon might direct.
Right. So, okay, now I see it there. So, and that sentence was crossed out and then replaced with some other piece that doesn't mention Lake Forest Park. So that's why I was just curious why that. I mean, the sentence about contracting with Lake Forest Park was crossed out.
Right. I think it was just that we weren't referring to all the things that Public Works contracts with. Public Works and engineering are combined in a single function at this point, and we contract with many services in that department. So that we have contracts for people who are designing the streets or building the streets or any number of things. If you think it's important and you want to acknowledge that we do partner with our neighboring communities, that's fine. There's no reason we can't.
I just remembered that we used to contract, so that's why I was a little confused when I saw it crossed out. But it's not a big deal. So, no
Anybody
worries.
else? Strong feelings? No feelings?
No, I know the answer.
I'm doing a little poll here.
Oh,
It looks like nobody has strong feelings. My preference is sort of, and you've heard this in response to some other things that we've done in the comp plan or the vision statement, I think shorter is a little better. It gives more meaning to what's there. You know, we could go on forever with some of this stuff. You know, we support good weather. We support all the sports teams. We support clean living. Sure, we do all that, and it's unassailable, but I think it means more when we get kind of specific. And we have to inventory every form of service that we provide or who provides it or where, that kind of thing. I'm not sure it conveys valuable information that has to be in a comp plan. That's me.
well, that was
Yeah.
that was kind of another point. That was actually my only other point on this was I think maybe in the human services section or somewhere, there was kind of an enumeration of a whole bunch of services that serve Kenmore residents. And I wasn't sure what the net was for that list of services because some of them are clearly countywide services. Some of them are specific to Kenmore. If it was countywide, you're missing about 3/4 of them. And, so I just wasn't
Right.
sure why those particular ones.
Right. Again, in most cases, it was because we provide funding. So we may provide funding to an agency, even though it's a countywide service provider.
So like we provide money to the crisis line?
That Crisis 211, yes, I think we do. I've got the list.
The crisis clinic 24-hour crisis line. I mean,
Right.
I work for the department that runs that, so I'm surprised to know that.
But
So-
don't bite the hand that feeds you, Deborah.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that.
So let me
So
let me
that's cool.
find my list. The other place that some of the information came from was it's called the North Shore. What is it called? It's NUHSA, N-U-H-S-A, the North Urban Human Services
Yep.
Alliance, and there's some information that came from them. I hope I have this funding sheet here, and then I can confirm that. But I'm
Well, just so as not to
90+% certain.
Yeah, just so as not to confuse people, then maybe just clarify in the sentence that precedes that long list of services, what your inclusion criteria are, because then people will say, oh, well, that's why that county service is there, but the one that's just like it that's not there is not there for a reason. And,
Right.
So
the funding information, there were Kenmore-based agencies. Those was a physical presence in Kenmore. Countywide, the funding, and yes, King County, the Crisis Clinic 24-hour crisis line and 211 are both funded.
Wow.
With a small amount. So I think a clarifying sentence about why some of these were included, I think that's a good idea if the rest of the commission is.
On board, any objection? No? Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right, so if there were no more background questions, then we could turn to the goals and policies, and those start on page 9-34. The goals in the comp plan are numbered consecutively, so that's why this is goal 43. It just happens to be where it falls in the comp plan, but it's the first goal in the public services element. And the page numbers are down in the lower right-hand corner. This is chapter 9, so 9-34 is goal 43.
Anybody want to comment on the proposed language from the staff or deletions?
We can walk through, or we can do it by exception, whatever you're comfortable with.
I'd say exception, unless there are objections to that. What do you think? Good with that? Anybody have exception, take exception, or comment on something the staff has proposed? Good with it? Mark?
Just a second, I'm trying to find out where. Okay, on implementation strategies, I guess it's 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. The seventh bullet says, encouraging human services providers and other agencies to develop updated summaries of human services needs and services and to provide information on gaps in service for Kenmore residents. I wondered if we could take it a step further and ask them to include plans about how those gaps might be filled, not the city doing those, but the providers. Is that something that could be? That's taking that information, but maybe moving it a little further in terms of filling those gaps.
I think that's fine. The whole notion of this implementation strategy, as I'm sure you read through the background information, there was a really comprehensive report done by Common Ground in 2000 that I found really helpful, and I was looking for updated information, but there's no report, and I think it would be really useful for the community to have updated information because we fund and just because times have changed, and 2000 is 15 years ago, and so I think that would be a good addition if the commission is comfortable with that.
Any objection? No?
It's okay.
Anyone else? Deborah?
I don't think this is an exception. I'm curious. So the things under the implementation strategies that are crossed out, is that because we've essentially accomplished most of them, or?
It varies.
Okay.
For example, recruitment and increased utilization of volunteers, there's a really robust volunteer
Exactly.
program now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would say we have accomplished that. The same with the emergency management system. That's been definitely moved forward. The library location and city hall location. Defining the city's role and potential funding for human services. There is a program in place now, and hopefully this new information would supplement that gap. So we could go through all of them, but I think that for the most part, these are things that have been accomplished, or I felt that they had been accomplished.
All right, anyone else? Mark?
One more. Under, for me, Goal 47, support the provision of effective and accessible human services that address community concerns. PS-47.1 and bullet, or letter B there, talks about, at the end, City Hall could also be a central source of information on services available to Kenmore residents. And I guess I was wondering, since it seems like, most of this information is already in this document, whether we could maybe make that should? I mean, how hard would it be to
Should
have
be a
this
central source.
available for, on your website or other information sources?
Yeah.
Just because it seems like it's already been compiled and exists, so.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't
And some of
necessarily
it
be a
is
lot
actually on the website
Oh, is it?
already.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's fine.
Yeah.
If you want to change that to should rather than could.
Any objection? No?
Oh, should continue.
You could have, we're already doing it now, so it would be continue or?
Oh, okay.
City Hall
Well,
should continue to be.
Sure, there you go.
Is everyone comfortable with that?
No
Okay.
objection? Okay.
I have a question about that. Do you mean City Hall as the physical location or as the entity, including the website?
Oh, probably both. That we have a little area, community area, right outside the door here to the left where we provide a lot of information. The receptionist has volumes of information when people come to the counter. So both. Maybe. Maybe rather than City Hall, maybe it should just say the city or city something. We can think of the right phrasing.
I interpreted it kind of both ways. City Hall, the building, and City Hall, the
Website.
administration that supports the website. So
Okay, so
maybe
you're comfortable
I'm
with
comfortable
that.
with the language. I was just wondering
Okay,
what you
right.
meant when you put it together.
Right.
Angela?
I have a question. I have several questions actually about Objective 46.3 regarding library services in the community. The first policy says maintain inclusion in the King County Library System District. Is it a concern that we could be pushed out of the King County Library System District? Okay.
I don't think so. I think that at the time of incorporation, it was probably a question for us. I don't think it's a question anymore. I just left it in. I don't know. I just left it in. We could take it out.
So we don't.
So if there's
So we
confusion
don't get
over
excluded.
it,
Okay.
we should probably take it out.
I'd be inclined to take it out if we're already doing that for the stuff
Yeah.
that's satisfied.
All right, so let's.
It kind of leads one to think, are we in the bubble here?
Okay, so is everyone comfortable with that?
Is
We'll
that
just-
overdue book going to break?
That's why they're going to kick you out,
Yeah,
Doug.
maybe.
And then a general question about objectives, kind of in general, like, because I'm used to writing them differently and that they have to be very measurable. So is there anywhere in the comprehensive statement where we talk about what the baseline is or what we're using for comparison purposes?
Not currently.
Okay.
There is not.
Okay.
Yeah, and the implementation section tends to be where the standards that are being measured are found. So here's how we're going to get to these goals and policies, and here are some steps that we could take.
Okay. Kind of related to that, there were figures about some of the police staffing as compared to our residents, and I noticed that is becoming more residents per staff member, which I understand. Most departments are having budget cuts, but it's a concern given the amount of calls that are increasing and also the response time. So as a city, what can we do in response to that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I talked to Chief Souther about this level of service, number of officers per unit of population. And he felt that needed to come out, not because there was a concern about budget or anything else, but because that is it's a measurement that is old and is outmoded, and that the police service has moved away from thinking that you need a certain number of officers per 1,000 people in the community, and instead moving toward an approach that looks at what are the real needs, what are the issues, and then staffing to the need rather than this more artificial construct of staffing to so many officers per 1,000. The fire chief basically said the same thing, that used to be, when this comp plan was done in 2003, that used to be the way you staffed, or that was the sort of the nationwide goal for policing, but that is no longer the strategy for how to do it. You staff to the issues that you face.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yes, Angela.
I'm sorry, I had one more question. When we refer to emergency management, does that also encompass emergency preparedness?
Yeah.
It does, okay.
Yep. Is there something that would help?
I guess we could just maybe add that term. Because emergency management makes me think of like what happens in the emergency, like are we taking care of everyone, whereas preparedness sounds more like we've proactively prepared for a crisis. Right?
It,
It
right.
was towards
So in
the
Objective
end.
45.3, establish an emergency management office and system, maybe what would be useful would be a new policy that talks about providing information and encouraging citizens in emergency preparedness activities. That's not very eloquent,
Yeah,
but you
something
get the
like that.
concept.
Any objection? No? Okay.
Okay. Right, any other?
Any other comments? None? Mark?
This is bouncing back, I'm sorry, to page, I guess it's page 9-10, it's number 10 on the PDF. Sorry about the interlocal agreement with the various cities about pooling a portion of human services funds down towards the bottom.
Right.
So I guess I was wondering, there was some verbiage about, not necessarily being enough services physically located in Kenmore. Are those interlocal agreements, is that an avenue to try to work to get, to get those services physically within the community more so, or is that kind of beyond the scope of those agreements?
Those agreements are mostly for assigning funds. They're more funding
okay,
agreements
not for
rather
actual
than
provision of
getting the service.
services
It's
then.
more how the services are funded.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? None? All right. I think we have agreement here.
It sounds like it. Okay.
Well, that
Well-
satisfies that element of the agenda. There being nothing else on the agenda, is there any comment or new business? What's up for next? The next meetings here?
So on
Vision statement.
March the 3rd, since we finished this, I would anticipate that we would start that meeting with the vision statement. So by that time, hopefully, everybody will have had a chance to go through and peruse the materials, and we can sort of button that up, that recommendation. The next thing on that agenda, there were several items, holdover questions and information you requested related to healthy and active living and sustainability. So I have that information, and that will be coming forward to you, and that may prompt some additional discussion about those. And then the last item on the agenda is it's an update of, it's basically the demographic background section. There aren't really goals and policies attached to that, so that I would anticipate would be a quick item, but it does provide some updated background information about the community. And so as it's part of the comprehensive plan, I want you to take a look at it. Then on the 17th, we're hoping, fingers crossed, to bring forward airport planning issues. I met with PSRC about airport planning last week. I'm meeting with the state this week to talk about it, and then we'll be meeting with the owner. And I also need to consult with a pilots association, so this is all very new to me, but hope to bring that forward then on the 17th. And at that point, we will have hit on all the major items that we were going to look at. And then the next few meetings really will be sort of going through the document, seeing if there are other issues, sort of page by page, element by element, if there are other issues that need to be brought forward to clean it up before we have the public hearing, which is scheduled for April 21st.
So are we going back over elements we've already revised?
I would not anticipate going over elements we've revised. For example, the transportation element.
Okay.
I will say that there was some question about whether there are airport planning policies in the transportation element. I envisioned that the bulk of the balance of the policies would go into the land use element. I'm still sort of talking with PSRC and the state about that. If they say, no, it really should be in the transportation element, it's not a big deal. We would just insert some more policies in the section in the transportation element. So there could be some minor amendments, but we're certainly not.
Substantively, it's settled.
No,
Okay.
unless there's something that's so outdated that we just didn't catch. In the land use element particularly, we adjusted several things in the land use element, but there still could be some items or background information that needs to be updated.
Okay, Carol?
Is the background information forecasts of, say, population growth, that sort of thing? Is that included in that part?
Right. And unfortunately for you newer folks, you did not. We did a PowerPoint last fall that had some of that information, but this will be helpful in that it will put it all into a piece of paper that you will have in front of you. Yes, it talks about existing conditions, some from the census, some from the State Office of Financial Management. It talks about employment, resident characteristics, and then the forecasts are in there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around again. The vision statement survey, you mentioned last night, Lori, that I think I wrote down 88% of the respondents were from single-family homes.
Correct.
Does that mirror the population?
No.
Or could you just summarize that? Because that
Right.
I wanted to
So,
follow up.
again, I don't have.
I don't think it was necessarily in the written.
I think in the.
It was in the
the-
PowerPoint slide.
No, yeah, I know. 88% is the number, absolutely.
On the survey.
The number that I'm struggling with, which was 70%, is what the American Community Survey says is sort of the relative percentage of units. So it's not completely apples and apples. What we can say is that 70% of the housing units in Kenmore are single-family residences, which means that 30% are multifamily, or there's another category, mobile homes and special housing units. So 70% of the units are there, but you see their vacancy rates. There are some finer details, if you think about it, that may not exactly equate, but it's not that 88% of our housing units are single family, and therefore this group is totally representative. There are more people responding to this survey who live in single family than there are than the percentage of actual single family units.
Right. Okay. So you would say it would be broadly representative?
I would say that it's over-representative, that there are more people responding to the survey who live in single family units and fewer folks who live in multifamily units who responded to the survey.
Because you also mentioned that I think that there was some pushback against the higher density housing.
There were opinions in both directions.
Right, but I wonder if the preponderance of single-family respondents may have had something to do with that.
That's an interesting question, and that is a piece of information that I may be able to cross-tabulate. So maybe I'll try to take a look at that. Okay?
Anyone else? Nothing else? Yes, Mike.
Yep. Laura, do you know what the reach number was for the survey?
I don't know what that is.
I'm sorry. How many people could it have reached? How many people could have seen the opportunity to take the survey?
A lot of people, I think, personally. I can tell you how, I touched on this briefly, but there was a story in the Bothell-Kenmore Reporter. There was an ad in the Bothell-Kenmore Reporter, which my understanding is delivered, like it or not, to every household. Isn't that correct? In the community, at least
Give or take.
Give or take. Okay. It was on the city's website. Again, that's probably more limited. We sent it out in North Shore Utility District mailings, bill mailings. That didn't reach everyone in the community because the Kenmore, the cycle is such that only half of Kenmore residences receive it. I think it's like every other month, so we could only capture some percentage of Kenmore residents. We took it to the library and asked them to advertise it. We contacted PTA groups and asked them to send it out to their membership. I contacted the school district and asked them to put up the information. I'm not sure that they did that. The chief sent it out to his block watch captains. We really tried to get the information out there, so there was certainly no limit on who could have done it, whether it caught their eye and they did it and they decided to do it or not. I don't know.
Right. I saw the link on Facebook, and I think a lot of people might have done that as well. I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty effective reach method, right?
Yeah.
The news, I also saw the link in the Kenmore Reporter, but that's a less effective means because you can't click that.
Right,
You have
and
to
get
then
into it.
Translate that over to your
Right.
PC.
Right.
Probably the same goes for your utility bill.
Right. So
reason I'm
Facebook
asking is-
and Twitter both were. We
Oh,
put
yeah.
those both on.
Yeah, I think anything online is going to be greatly effective.
Right.
And the website, I'm sure, probably hosted
Had
a
the
link
link.
to it too, and that would be great.
I did.
The reason I'm asking is because I'm trying to get my head around the significance of the number of responses, right? 272. We talked, and I don't know if that's important to focus on or not, to be honest with you. I know that, we talked last night that with a population of about 21,000, that's approximately a 1% response rate. But
Right.
that's kind of a meaningless thing to say because 21,000 people are not survey-capable people.
Right.
I'm assuming that includes kids,
Exactly.
right?
Right. It does.
None of my kids are going to complete a survey on a vision statement.
Right.
So,
And-
do we know how many of those are PC-owning adults or computer-owning adults?
No, we don't. And there were paper copies provided, and certainly the materials advertised that they could contact me if they had questions or needed a copy of the survey. I don't think beyond doing a scientifically valid portion of the community that we're going to get a scientifically valid result. However, if you think of 272 responses versus how many people we would have here at a public open house, I personally feel like it was really successful because we often host those meetings in the evening trying to capture community interest. The Regional Business Zone project, which was a big project we had last year, we sent direct mailings to every single person that was affected by that project, and we still probably didn't have more than 30 folks turn out at a meeting. So I think in that regard, it was probably a successful public outreach effort.
Mm-hmm.
What it's worth, Mike, I think there are about 12,000 registered voters in Kenmore. Gives a sense of... Well, if you look at a city council election, it'll say in the county responses how many registered voters there were in this jurisdiction. I think it's close to 12,000, and then about half of them vote off your elections, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you need obviously half of those to get a seat. So sort of the rule of thumb has been you get 3,000 votes here, you're probably going to get elected. Yeah, Carol.
The survey wasn't scientific, and even in this discussion, we've realized that it accomplished what it was meant to accomplish, and that is providing an opportunity for the public to have input. Correct?
Correct.
So, that was a task that the staff did and accomplished that task because it's in our comprehensive plan. As a city, we would be intentional about that. What we do with the survey, though, is, I think, what's the key.
Right.
We can't weight that survey as being, the gospel law of what this community wants us to do. We still have to do due diligence to look at our vision statement and comprehensive plan. It's just a guideline for the elected representatives. But we also have an obligation to the state to maintain these documents. So as we move forward, we have a working document that is governing our community. We don't know all the changes that are going to come our way based on the economy, who knows. But at least we have a working document, and we can also go back in time and say, hey, we did give the public an opportunity to have input, and at the time we did this comprehensive plan, we didn't get a big response. Maybe there'll be an issue in the future where the public does want to participate, and that would reflect in the future for changes that maybe we didn't make now. Is that correct?
Well, certainly when we're doing our comprehensive plan, the goal is to always, whenever we're thinking about changing something, to involve the public in some way.
Sure.
So, yes, through the years, we would, again, revisit.
So it's not like we're just going to close this comprehensive plan, put it away for 20 years, and then look at it again.
No, it's the comprehensive plan. It's a long-range document, kind of forecasting out 20 years, but it's not a static document.
Right.
You pick it up periodically to see what needs to change to reflect changes in the community, changes in policy, whatever changes that are there. So that's why periodically the state requires you to go through that effort, but it doesn't mean that you can't do that. Well, you can do it on on an annual basis.
Sure.
You don't want to be constantly changing it, but you give people an opportunity once a year to say, is there a section of the comprehensive plan that needs to be updated to reflect current changes? So I think moving forward, I think what we've tried to do is put update of elements of the comprehensive plan on more of a cycle. So you'll see the park and recreation element is on a 5 or 6 year cycle so that we can be up to date and be current if we want to apply for grant funding. Same thing on the transportation element. So again, we're trying to make sure that this is a living document that is updated, and we're going to be more diligent about doing that. And one of the other things that we try and do as we update is try and make things as efficient and streamlined as we can. And I think the Planning Commission has taken that to heart on all the recent work programs that they've had. So that's what we hope to do.
Thank you for your work. I think the survey was a great success because it did give people the opportunity to make these comments, and they're in the public record. And, what we choose to do with that information is going to be what our next meeting is about.
Yeah.
I might just make one comment about the comments. As I was preparing the PowerPoint last evening for the joint meeting, I, obviously read through many, I haven't read through all of them, but skimmed all of the comments, and I thought, well, maybe I should pull out this one. This is an interesting comment. And then I thought, why would I weight this comment any more than this comment? I know nothing about this person. I don't know that this person represents two people. So I'm really cautious about how we use the comments, because I think even more than the aggregated survey results, they are not representative. They could be, but there's no way to know.
Well, sorry, Angela, did the council indicate that they were especially sensitive to and wanted the vision statement to reflect the survey results? Or did they express, well, this is guideline and, this is helpful, but we're here to represent people and they've invested their trust in our judgment, and there might be some survey results that we'll give less weight to than our personal perception of the city's future?
I don't think that the city council said respond only to the survey. They didn't say that.
I just wondered if they implied or indirectly
I did not think so. I
conveyed
don't
something
know if,
about the importance of respecting the survey results,
No.
the weight they would give it. Angela?
I actually, Councilwoman Danuski specifically pointed out the fact that it was 200 some respondents, and that wasn't a large ratio of our city's population.
Right.
correct. Right.
Okay. Yeah, Mike? Did somebody else have their hand up first?
We're both.
This is kind of arbitrary. So, Mike, Debbie is yielding to you. Deborah. You see, we got two Debbies. We really don't. We have a Deborah. We have two Deborahs,
We
right?
have two Debras.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going with Debbie and Deborah.
That's fine.
But
with
the
me.
mic thing, I got to do that with body language here. You got to trust me on that, unless you wants to go with Michael.
So We'll work it out.
Your call. Go ahead, Mike.
We've been okay for a couple weeks now.
I think so.
On the work that I understand that's ahead, that you're going to be making some recommendations on the vision statement. As I look through the clean copy that you sent today in email, I can look at this and really feel we could put check marks next to almost everything here. I really feel this does reflect Kenmore. And if this was amended recently and maybe primarily drafted around the incorporation of the city, then I think we've done a great job. And I don't know if I would have said that in 1998, frankly, with a lot of these things. But looking ahead to 2035, I guess, as you're working on some of those recommendations, I would like to see the vision statement really be aspirational.
Right, that is
Right?
the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't feel, when we get back together again in 2 weeks, that I could put a check mark next to everything. So if it was to say something like a vibrant waterfront community, I think that can be a really powerful statement that we can put out as a 2035 vision that I can't say it is today. But it's highly aspirational, and I think if we in the community who responded believe that's where we want to go, I think that's a great position for us to take.
Thanks, Mike. Anything else? Deborah, yeah.
Oh, just a quick reflection on the comments in the survey. I mean, I guess I'm seeing them as, sort of a really big public comment period. I mean, I think your point was really well taken. When we have meetings where we invite the same exact kind of feedback, we get 35 people and we listen with rapt attention, and now we've got 200 and some people. So I think we would incorporate, I would assume we would incorporate those as we would any other input, with our filters and what we bring to it. And I think there was, on Mike's comment too, I didn't say this last night, but you'll see this too when you look at the comments if you haven't already seen it. There is some confusion, I think, between, is it aspirational? I mean, from the people responding to the survey, I think there was some confusion that they seem to have it between, is this aspirational or should we have already gotten it done? And some frustration, I think, from the people that think we should have already gotten it done. But I too see it as very much an aspirational document. It's a vision for what we want to get to. So I think that's okay to have a difference between where we are now versus then. So
Good points. Okay. Is that it?
Doug,
Anyone else?
I have
Go
one
ahead.
logistical item.
Yes.
Your meeting on April 6th, there is a conflict. 7th even. 7th?
I think
7th.
7th.
Whatever the first Tuesday in April is, there's a conflict. You're right, it's the 7th. It's the 7th. There is a conflict. There is likely going to be scheduled a sort of community workshop with a very good guest speaker whose book, if you want to look it up, is called For the Love of Cities. So Peter Kagayama is the gentleman that we're trying to bring in to come and kind of give his presentation and put his spin on what Kenmore can do. So if you want some extra reading, Deborah, I'm sure, could take a look at that. But anyway, that's kind of the evening that's targeted for this presentation. So we can cancel that meeting, but I think it would be helpful if we could reschedule that meeting to March 31st. What that does is it means you have 3 meetings in March, but 1 in April. It's kind of key that we do that in order to keep on track and be able to meet the goal of having your public hearing on April 20th. So in the next day or so, if you could check your calendars and shoot me a quick email and let me know if March 31st would be okay for that meeting, a Planning Commission meeting.
And I know you all will be invited to the presentation on April 7th. It should be very interesting.
Is there any expectation that any of us attend the State of the City address tomorrow?
I don't think there's any requirement.
No.
I'm standing.
You're going? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So Mike will be our proxy on behalf of the entire commission.
Perfect.
And give you some feedback.
Did you get that, Mike?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're going to represent all of us at
Can you
that.
make a speech?
I will.
Okay. Just so you know,
Behalf of the Planning Commission.
please,
Is anyone else going?
don't look that way.
Okay.
Thanks.
Should be good.
Are you going, Mark?
No,
Okay.
If you were interested in going, I think it's the Bothell Chamber of Commerce. If you go on their website, you can. Oh, is it sold out? It's sold out.
There was something in Nancy's weekly update
Uh-huh.
that said if you would like, and I'm assuming that was intended for city employees, and that said if you would like to attend, contact her, so she may have an inside track on some tickets.
If you're interested, then certainly do
I
that.
have it in your email.
Yeah, I
All right,
did see
d- if you-
but I wasn't able to do anything.
Okay. Okay. It's a popular event.
There's a lot of side entrances to Inglemore Golf Club.
Oh, yes.
Just go in with a tray.
I'm very familiar with it.
Are we still on the record? I'm
You
sorry.
know, we are on the record, and
I'm pretty sure I can sneak in and nobody
I think the general manager of the club probably
Yeah.
be reviewing this video, but I think white on black might get you more mileage than, okay. No, but seriously, if Carol and or Mike could report back to us on anything you think replies and give us that, that'd be really great. Appreciate it. All right, anyone else? We sort of covered the notion of any new business, but I have to say that before I adjourn. Any new business? There being no new business, I hereby adjourn the meeting.